Iker, Clamire, and Blight Mamba, he actually gets to be a monocolor deck and have great mana. Andrew Jessup on the more traditional blue-green version.
Yeah, I mean, we're looking 4 Forest, 4 Inkmoth Nexus, 2 Pendelhaven, and a bunch of fetch lands. The fetch lands in here just to facilitate Become Immense.
All right, Ely on the play. Starts off with Inkmoth Nexus. Andrew will Gitaxian Probe. Andrew's on a mulligan to 6 here, but he's going to get to see who he's working against. Information is so crucial in this matchup. You see Ely with the Blight Mamba, so he has another Infector, another Inkmoth, a Forest, and then a lot of Pump. Giant Growth, Rancor, and Become Immense all in his hand.
Now, he doesn't have a lot to prime the pump here for the Become Immense. Not really stuff to get in the graveyard here besides Giant Growth, but still very fast hand.
Yeah, that Rancor figuring to do some work. We'll see what Andrew has. Looks like Andrew may have one of the trumps here, though. In his spotting in his opening hand a copy of spells, one of his main deck spell skites.
Yeah, very, very powerful in this matchup. Life total, not a factor, obviously, so you can be extremely aggressive using Phyrexian mana. And spell skite makes every pump spell so problematic.
Yeah, Blight Mamba, the turn 2 play from Ely. Talking about that one earlier, the common here from Scars and Mirrodin, and really every cheap Infector seeing play at some point.
Yeah, no, I'm having some flashbacks to drafting this format. I don't know how many copies of this I own on Magic Online, but probably more than whatever the second most owned common I have out of that set.
You're a big Blight Mamba fan.
Oh yeah.
I'll tell you what, I was siding with the Mirrans. I was always the Metalcraft guy.
I was not.
You know, we will endure, right? All right, Spellskite the play for Andrew. That didn't go well for the little cats and little robots. They didn't end up winning the war. Spellskite the play for Andrew. And Ely gonna have to chunk his way through that Spellskite. Gets one -1/-1 counter on it, and then the mirror will join the table.
Yeah, part of the mono green brigade here. No access to things like Blighted Ancient as a concession to his mana base. A lot of pump spells in this list, as you would imagine here. Become Immense, Rancor, Giant Growth, Might of Old Kroza, Vines of Basswood, Mutagenic Growth, Groundswell, alongside a couple copies of the Phyrexian Mana Enablers.
Yeah, and that one's actually going to do a very good job at getting through Spellskite. When it's blocked, it gets +2/+2, so that would take care of the Spellskite if Jessup blocks it.
Yeah, the big fear here from Ely's side of the table is with Spellskite and a Nexus in play, Andrew can be very, very aggressive in trying to damage raise here. Ely does have a bit of a board, but his pump kill is basically cut off for the time being.
Yeah, and he can do 1 damage at a time with the mirror.
Right. Andrew has a lot of control over how the damage race goes, and one player can use their pump spells and the other can't. So this is a very positive position for Andrew to be in.
Inkmoth Nexus will swing in. That'll put Ely down to at 1 poison. No pump spells as of just yet. And he'll go ahead and pass. He has Verdant Catacombs up. So we go over to Ely's turn. Inkmoth will activate, and he's going to have to play fair with his infect creatures right now. No pump spells, just have them at face value. The Spellskite will jump in front of Blight Mamba, so 2 poison onto Andrew.
Yeah, I mean, this is all Ely can do.
Right, and that's the danger, is that right now it looks like Ely's in the race, but eventually Andrew will start playing cards like a Giant Growth or Might of Old Kroza and really break this open.
Yeah. And Spellskite really proving its value in a variety of matchups so far that we've had on camera, doing very good work against Splinter Twin, both for and against that deck, protecting from removal or preventing the combo from going off. And now Ely on the play, which should be a huge advantage in this kind of matchup, but Spellskite doing an excellent job of giving Andrew the hope of breaking serve here.
Go ahead and fetching Breeding Pool on end step. It does look like Vines of Vastwood, one of the tricks that Andrew has here to help push the race. It is keeping him stuck a little bit that he has to use his mana to activate his Infector every turn. He can't just go wild with the pump.
Right, his hand's a little clogged right now, but still, so much control over the way the race goes that...
Yeah, Become Immense in his hand right now, so and his graveyard is filling. just a single green mana open for Ely, so certainly is a green light for Andrew to dump pump spells.
And I think that Andrew should kind of space out the kill over the course of a couple turns here if he can. He doesn't need to go in one shot because he still has Spellskite available, which cuts off almost anything Ely could realistically have as a response. So if you go attack and Vines this turn, and then attack and become immense next turn, that's traditionally not the kind of sequence you like to do with Infect. You try to do it all at once, but it's not bad for Jessup here to pursue that line of play.
I'll go ahead and fetch here. Yeah, right now, just the Ink Moth as an Infector for Andrew. But outside of the Spellskite, this, at least game one, does seem like both decks are just trying to race each other.
I think that Andrew is advantaged here, game one at least, because the mana base is a freebie. The blue spells you're adding to your deck are completely free. He's also got 2 copies of Spellskite to Ely's 0 copies in the main.
And here you see Andrew being aggressive with those pump spells. Inkmoth Nexus will swing. Vines of Vastwood will attempt to make it a 5/5, and Ely's going to Vines it in response. Or attempt to, but Spellskite once again proving its worth and grabbing the Vines away.
Yep. Unknown mode of Vines to a lot of players is you can fizzle stuff on your opponent's cards as well. Right. So they try to equip something, they try to put Splinter Twin onto something, and Vines can be disruption there.
And we're back over to Ely's turn. Taking 5 poison there off that Inkmoth Nexus puts him up to 6. As we know, Become Immense waiting in Andrew's hand next turn. Ely may have to leave back some flying blockers.
Yeah, he does get to trade potentially twice here. Also, the Spellskite is whittling down. So this is not the worst scenario here for Ely because, you know, if Andrew trades a Nexus, that's incredible for him.
Right.
And if they use a pump spell, that can be good too.
Inkmoth Nexus will be activated. It's going to go ahead and attack. Ely's going to go ahead and go for that trade. And Andrew's going to Apostle's Blessing. And so Apostle's Blessing can actually give protection from artifacts as well.
Right, and it's important to do this here because the Infect token goes on the Nexus even if a pump spell saves it. So then it's off the table to be activated in future turns.
Right, and that'll be enough. That plus the Become Immense is a lethal attack, and game one over to Andrew Jessup.
Yeah, you just saw how dominating Spellskite was in that game. Ely with Giant Growth and Rancor that we knew about that he couldn't cast, and potentially other pump spells as well.
Yeah, it really seemed to be just kind of the story of the game right there.
That was the whole game.
All right, you see here, Andrew Jessup currently at 15th. That is our position right now in the race for Season 1. So we're going to go ahead and take a look at our leaderboard here. Andrew Jessup making a run. He was not part of the Players' Championship last year, but getting up in the standings as we move into this season.
Right, we're still very early on. Right now, for the Season 1 point invite, it's a race between basically Jim Davis and Kevin Jones at this stage of things, with Joe Lissette trailing. Jim Davis is in attendance this weekend, as is Kevin Jones. Joe staying home in California. Ross Merriam here as well. You see the lead here that Jim has on Kevin Jones. It's substantial, 24 points. First prize in this tournament is worth 25 Open Series points alongside the $5,000 in cash. So it's possible for Kevin to make up a ton of the ground this weekend, but as things stand, Jim with a commanding control on the Season 1 race for the Players' Championship.
Remember, these players also getting 2 buys at these events to our top 16s. We look at places 9 through 16. That's actually where Andrew Jessup is currently sitting. 15th, a relevant position.
Yep, and as you mentioned, 2 buys good for the Open Series, and you know, he travels around a lot with his brother Danny and with Jim Davis, and those 2 players definitely with a lot more Open Series finishes, but Andrew very successful grinding the IQ circuit around the New York area, has had some good Open Series finishes. So even though not quite the same resume as his brother at this point, still has a lot of Open Series success, and you can see him on the top 16 on the leaderboard.
All right. Bringing back to the match, we saw just how good Spellskite is. There were no Spellskites in Ely's main deck. Does he have access to any, though, in the board?
He does. He's got a lot of action for this matchup. 2 copies of Grafdigger's Cage, 2 copies of Nature's Claim, a Dismember, 2 copies of Malira, 2 copies of Viridian Corruptor, 3 Spellskites, 3 Chokes. I like the Corruptors, the Maliras, the Dismember. and the Nature's Claim in this matchup alongside the 3 Spellskite. It's a lot to bring in.
Yeah, especially since Andrew, because of the... Yeah, I mean, they seem very good here. Melira, really an aggressive card to be boarding for the mirror.
Well, it's
that good.
If they can't get off the table, it's very hard for them to play Magic. So if you're anticipating a lot of Infect, very good use of sideboard slots.
Yeah. Over on Andrew's side, he did have the 2 main deck Spellskites. Those were able to get him game 1 pretty handily. He does have 2 more in his sideboard, as well as some of the hate of his own. He has 2 copies of Dismember and a full 4 copies of Nature's Claim. I have to think he can use all 4, thanks to the fact, especially that so many of Ely's Infectors are artifacts.
Yes, absolutely. And the 1 copy of Twisted Image in the sideboard here, also excellent. Good against both Noble Hierarch and Spellskite, 2 cards you can anticipate being in Ely's deck.
Now, what do you feel about cards like Distortion Strike? We see 2 of those in the main for Andrew and 1 in the sideboard. It doesn't pump as much as some of the other pump spells.
It depends, of course, how much blocking do you anticipate going on in the mirror matches. We saw in that game, with Spellskite involved, there's a lot of blocking that's going on. And that's a part of that card's impact. So I think the 1 Distortion Strike is fine here. You can, not that the board gets clogged, per se, in this matchup, but you do get into spots where someone is trying to chump block to swing the race, and it can be very powerful in those spots.
Yeah, a lot of this game seems like Spellskite's going to be, the fight over the Spellskite will be really important here.
Well, post-board, both players are bringing a lot more answers to the table. They
Right.
have Spellskites, there's Nature's Claims, Dismembers, Viridian Corruptors, Twisted Image. There's a lot of things floating around these decks. So yes, Spellskite matters, but both players are equipped with a lot of ways to get it off the table.
Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. The blue cards in Andrew's deck, remember he's splashing blue as opposed to being mono green Infect, don't seem like they're free here because he can just shock for the lands, but they don't seem to be mattering too much. It does feel like a pretty much mono green mirror.
Pretty close to it. Well, Blighted Ancient is a big player in this kind of matchup because Ely's deck can't really remove creatures from the table. He can only interact with artifacts, and so Blighted Ancient is just a very challenging card for him to interact with. It doesn't surprise me that he's got the 2 copies of Melira in his sideboard because I think that the main deck versus main deck, Andrew's got a substantial edge. Even if you set aside the 2 copies of Spellskite that are in Andrew's main deck, he's just got Blighted Ancient, which is very challenging for Ely to beat, and the mana's free. There's no
Right.
Blood Moon effects. The damage doesn't matter. The blue cards are just free.
So because he's down in the main, Ely's putting some Melira in his sideboard to compensate and hope to steal the postboard games?
I don't know if that's the logic, but it feels that way to me because I think he should anticipate game 1 not being in his favor. I mean, he was on the play and lost.
That is true. In a matchup where your game 1 is pretty bad, you need to make sure that your postboard games are significantly better. Otherwise, you're still an underdog in the matchup.
Right.
Ely on the play again. You'll lead off on Forest. We'll see what Ely's holding as Andrew starts on Jataxian Probe. Ely with 2nd land. Has Ichor Clawmere, Spellskite, the Melira we were talking about, and 2 copies of Become Immense.
Yeah, and Melira is not an easy card for Andrew's list to get off the table. There's no copies of, there are 2 copies of Dismember in his sideboard, but other than that, this card's going to have free reign.
Yeah, the Spellskite being just so important also in Ely's hand. The Become Immenses still feel a long ways off, like Ely's digging in for a slower game here.
Probably, but with Melira and Spellskite, he potentially has a ton of control over the way the game plays out.
Andrew does have a turn 1 Noble Hierarch on his side, so pass back over to Ely. See which 2-drop he goes for first.
I think that I would lead with Spellskite in this position because you want to put Andrew to the test to have a way to kill a Spellskite and then a Dismember after the fact.
Sure. He could play the Infector as well.
Okay.
Yeah, he's going to go for Ichor Clawmere. I suppose he'd rather, if Andrew has a kill spell, that Andrew spend it on this as opposed to the other 2 creatures.
Yeah, this is reasonable too. I guess my point is I don't like running out the Melira here.
Yeah, definitely agree there.
Spellskite first, then Melira. Make Andrew have 2 answers.
We pass back over to Andrew's turn. Copies of both Pendelhaven's, Spellskite, and Inkmoth Nexus in his hand. So we'll start with Glistener Elf for the turn. Inkmoth Nexus, really setting up for next turn. And then a copy of Spellskite. So a lot of weapons deployed for Andrew Jessup.
Yeah, great turn.
Iker Klamir, great against Spellskite, does unfortunately trade with Glistener Elf.
Yeah, again, that's the weird thing about Infect. Your pump spells to try to save your guys inside of combat don't really work in this kind of matchup.
Yeah. You get to look, this time Ely gets to look at Andrew's hand. We see Might of Old Krosa, Apostle's Blessing, Forest, and Pendlehaven. Right now, Andrew, the one with the advantage that Inkmoth Nexus is going to be able to do damage.
Yep.
But no removal here, so I suppose you could just see Ely. Well, I was going to say, I suppose you could see him go for the Melira if he wanted to.
Yeah, it's definitely gotten a bit more attractive, seeing that the coast is clear.
Drew a copy of Pendlehaven here. That's pretty good for Ely. Gonna go ahead and run out Melira now, knowing that she's safe. Has another copy of Iker Klamir in his hand as well.
So that's pretty good against Infect.
Yeah.
All three of the lines of text, pretty solid.
You can't get poison counters. Your creatures can't get 1/1 counters placed on them, so that's going to be pretty relevant because now this Glistener Elf does not trade with a Klamir. Yep. And creatures your opponents control lose Infect. So 2 poison will be dealt over to Andrew, thanks to Pendlehaven. We'll see, Andrew opted not, it looks like, never mind. Yeah, you can. I was going to say opted not. That's the one pump spell you still can play in the face of Spellskite because he's not a legal target.
Exactly. If you had a pump spell that also said, target non-artifact creature you control,
sure.
The Spellskite still has to be a legal target to be able to redirect.
If you're Andrew now, short of a kill spell, what's your game plan here?
I mean, you got to go conventional beatdowns, I guess, which is not a good spot to be in.
Pendlehaven made by Andrew Jessup. He's going to pump Glistener Elf to a 2/3. It attacks. It's a 3/4. Ely takes damage. He'll go to 14.
Got to start somewhere.
It still is, yeah, he's making progress. Just he's going to have to go for the life total now instead of in poison counters. And it's interesting because if Andrew does draw a removal spell for the Melira, then it's like he almost like Ely gains life because Andrew has to start over on the second life total then.
Yeah. And that's assuming that he is able to get this card off the table at all once Spellskite's involved in the equation.
Right, and this turn was his turn to do it, to draw that removal, but now, as you said, yeah, Spellskite is on the board. And Iker Klamir will swing in.
And you can see Jessup trying to find some way to finagle his tricks here, but the problem is that he can't really, even if he blocks, because the Infect on his creatures is shut off due to Melira, he's just chump blocking right now.
Right, there's no trades. Bladed Agent, the draw for Andrew Jessup.
Much less potent in the face of Melira.
No, I mean, none of these cards are good against Melira.
Yep. Blighted Agent, pretty powerful. Escape Artist, not so much.
Escape Artist is a 2/2, 1/1 unblockable for 2?
Yeah, you can pay a blue and discard a card to return it to your hand.
Okay. That makes sense because he's an Escape Artist.
Yeah, ZRT says he was known. The long and short of it is, it's hard for Jessup to do much of anything right now.
Iker Klamir will attack again. Andrew will go ahead and activate Inkmoth Nexus. This is 3 1/1s, and he's going to block the mirror with all 3 of them. I believe he's going to wait to see how Ely orders them, and then Pendlehaven. No, he's actually just chumping with Inkmoth. Okay.
Just a chump block.
And here is another mirror. I guess with the Pendlehaven, yeah, he just can't kill these mirrors. They're 4/5s if he blocks them. Back over to Jessup. Has Ely down to 14. He has a damage source in Blighted Agent, but it's not going to do much damage.
And if you watch a lot of Standard, this is another point of differentiation between Standard and Modern is there are more sideboard cards, and sometimes you see them appear in main decks, where it's just lights out. Like, you see some good sideboard cards in Standard.
Changes, yeah.
But, cards like Stony Silence, Malira, Blood Moon, they're not normal Magic cards when they show up in the appropriate matchups. It's hard for the opposing decks to function in the face of them. Don't see a lot of that kind of sideboarding in Standard.
Blighted Agent is going to swing in and get Pendelhaven. Ely is down to 11. And while Andrew's pump spells are worse, they're not non-functional here. If Ely wants to redirect into the Spellskite, he does have to pay 2 life. And that is the total that Andrew's going for. So they do something, just not what Andrew really hoped they would do.
Right. It's not impossible for Infect to win this way. In fact, at the Grand Prix that I played, I did lose to Infect via damage. It can happen. But that's not where the deck's most efficient.
Back over to Ely. He's going to go ahead and, looks like, pre-combat pump 1 of his Mirror. Now he's going to play second Pendelhaven to Legend roll away the first. Wants to make them both impossible to block. Then he's going to swing in with all 3 creatures. So we have 1 Mirror that's already a 2/3, a 1/1 and a 1, and then a pair of 1/1s.
Mm-hmm.
It's just going to make blocking very difficult for Jessup.
Now, Ely, remember, still does not have this thing sewn up. The Blighted Agent does give Andrew some hope of being able to win through damage. And in an odd way, the Malira makes Ely's Spellskite a little bit worse, because now his life total is the resource that matters.
Right, so he actually, it's not a free roll to pay for the points. But Andrew's already chump blocking an awful lot here. So he's going to go ahead and put Spellskite in front of Glistener Elf and Inkmoth Nexus in front of the Mirror that's already been pumped. So now both Mirror get pumped to a 2/3. So Andrew will lose the Inkmoth. Spellskite gets 1 poison counter, and Andrew gets 2 more, and he moves up to 6 poison. Just how many more creatures can Andrew afford to throw under the bus? The Noble Hierarch's doing a lot of work here.
Well, the big problem is also the Spellskite's really valuable for Andrew here, because you have to, if you're sitting in this spot, you have to feel like if my Spellskite dies, all hell's going to break loose. Ely's going to be able to dump his whole hand into something.
Pendelhaven pumps Blighted Agent to a 2/3, exalts up to a 3/4, swings in, still unblockable here. Could put Ely down to 8. And it does. Andrew continuing to make some progress here. Misty Rainforest to play for the turn. I believe his hand is Vines of Vastwood, Might of Old Krosa, Apostle's Blessing. Didn't know if we would see a pump spell get fired off there. Maybe he has to do one defensively.
Yep.
Really, it almost doesn't matter when he plays them, because if it's too good of a pump spell, Ely will just take it. Unless Andrew's trying to pump his own Spellskite, which he can do because he'll win the Spellskite war.
Right.
So swing from Ely. The 3 Infectors getting in again. Andrew sitting at a full 6 poison. Glistener Elf will go in front of Ichor Clamir. Spellskite in front of Ely's Glistener Elf. And then Ely points out the trigger. His attacking mirror will get bigger. And Andrew's going to go ahead and let that happen. I was wondering if we'd see a defensive pump spell there, or some way to try to manage this damage. Wild Defiance is the play for Ely, and that is going to be pretty good against Spellskite.
Yeah.
Andrew fetches on end step. If you're Andrew, do you assume you're dead on next turn because of this Wild Defiance?
Yes, absolutely. I'm not trying to play another turn past this one.
And Ely's still at 8. The Blighted Agent can become a 3-power. Andrew has 2 pump spells that Ely will have to steal, but it seems like Andrew may be 1 damage point short here.
It's going to be real close here. I mean, those Spell Skite activations, again, they are not free.
And Become Immense, the draw for Andrew. Does he have enough? Can he? I believe he might. He can, if he can triple pump this Blighted Agent, he's gonna, I think he might win this.
Yeah, no, I think he may have the tools.
I think Andrew thinks he might too. He just needs to get, yeah, two of these. If any one pump spell sticks, it will. I believe it will kill Ely. Well, each of them pumps at least 2. That's just the, yeah. Well, let's play it out. Blade Agent becomes a 2/3 with Pendelhaven. Andrew's gonna start out by Might of Old Crowsa-ing it. That would give it +4/+4. Ely certainly doesn't want that to happen. It's less damage if he spell skites it, so he goes into 6 to steal the Might of Old Crowsa. Here we go. Andrew's going to go ahead and try again. This time it's going to be Become Immense. Going to try to pump it more. Ely goes down to 4 for Spellskite. And this last one should do it. Andrew will Vines of Vastwood it with Kicker. That'll give it +4/+4. Ely cannot steal this one, otherwise he'll take lethal off Blighted Agent. And he's stuck between a rock and a hard place. This should be it for Andrew Jessup.
Now, if you wonder why did Ely cast the Wild Defiance there, in that kind of spot, it's pretty likely that if Andrew's hand is like that, Andrew kills him anyway, because all of Ely's Spellskite activations are 2 points of damage.
Right.
And it ensures that Ely has the kill the next turn.